media legend,
Oh,
Miss
stop.
Manhattan, Renaissance woman. How are you holding up? How are you doing?
You're just going straight there, aren't you?
Have to, yeah.
I'm good, Ryan. I'm good. It's I think I think what is the phrase now? I'm as good as can be expected, right? In all of the changing world that we have going on, and all of the adjustments to what potentially could be new normals, in everything that we're all trying to adapt to and understand, whether it's for us, our families, our kids, and the fears and challenges that we all have in staying safe and pushing society forward. All of those things wrapped up in one. I am as good as can be expected.
Well, the collective consciousness, everyone has that same kind of feeling. But you also have to add, for you added on a brand new role at L'Oreal. I mean, congratulations. I think you're less than a month in.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm less than a month in. It's super exciting. I think I sent a note to you. I'm like, I don't know how much about actual L'Oreal I can answer. I can tell you all of my personal experience and my media and marketing experience, but I don't know the insides of L'Oreal well enough to speak truly on behalf of the business at this point. But I have to say, it's an interesting time to be joining any company, to be transitioning jobs. And I know I'm not the only one out there that's transitioning jobs. It's challenging. I'm lucky to be in a position to have a job when so many are not at the moment. I grew up doing theater for many years, and all of my Broadway friends I'm heartbroken for. And I'll just put a PSA out there. If anybody has jobs for some of the folks on Broadway right now, let me know, and I'm happy to hook you up with some really amazingly talented people who are go-getters, who are not going to see the inside of a theater for a very long time. And they're
artists are getting completely undercut right now. So yes, great PSA. Anyone, please reach out to Shenan or us. We'll happily put you guys in touch.
Yeah,
very cool.
Absolutely.
Well, so pursuant to that, so you came over from Publicis. You're now running head of media for L'Oreal in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, what adjustments are you have to make? I mean, you haven't met your team, I assume. It's all virtual, right?
So mostly, we're at 50% capacity in the office. So I am actually getting to go to Hudson Yards, which I love. I'm actually really excited to be back in the office and spending some time, even if it's quiet, just spending some time in the physical space. There's, we build these, obviously you guys are at the influential office today, right? There's something really cool about the spaces that you build and the community you build. It's a little sad that it doesn't have the same buzz that I know it has. I've been in that space before when I was on the agency side. But it is nice to interact with humans other than my family. Not that I don't like my family, but humans other than my family has been kind of fun. So some of them I've had some opportunities to see in person. All of them I've met virtually at this point. Onboarding in this world is a little tough, if I'm honest. You get Zoom fatigue, like everybody does. There's a lot of notes to be taken and constant back-to-back calls, and it's hard. It's hard learning new people and kind of getting that personal experience. And then there's pluses. So the pluses I'd say would be things like you see the background in somebody's house and you see their kid, their dog, and you get some of those personal connections that might have come out over time. But I'll give you a great example. I was connecting with one of my colleagues in France yesterday, and she saw the pictures of my kids behind me, and I said, "Oh, they're 17 and 13. I just love these photographs of them. They're clearly not babies anymore." And we started chatting about the 17-year-old and her 17-year-old, and our two kids were born one day apart from each other. So we just had this kind of fun little connection of like, yeah, we were pregnant at the same time. Isn't that cool? We've got two kids that are exactly the same age. Was really neat. And we wouldn't have gotten to that point, I think, if we had been face to face, because you wouldn't have had a photograph of my kids in the background.
Yeah, it is a peek inside someone's lives. Yeah, we're usually in the pre-COVID where we're all handshakes and professionalism, and then we're out of there. But yeah, it's unique. I mean, I guess there is some upside. There is some extra human connection, weirdly, between Cisco or between any of these different places.
Yeah, it's a personalization.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I mean, so we have a lot of people tuning in, both brand side, agency side. You've been in the industry. You're a thought leader here. You actually worked with L'Oreal previously through an agency. Is it like a homecoming? Does it feel like you have some sort of advantages because kind of the deeper part of the brand from the agency side?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've worked with the L'Oreal brands a lot over my career. So I had an agency of my own called Morpheus Media for 14 years. Morpheus was an incredible company, if I do say so myself, that serviced most of the luxury fashion and beauty industry across, especially in the e-commerce space. And so at Morpheus, we had 7 L'Oreal brands for 7 years, mostly the active cosmetics division, a little bit of the professional products division. And then I moved to WPP, MEC, now ultimately Wavemaker, was the head of digital there, and then moved into being the president of the L'Oreal business during the pitch and the onboarding and a year into that business. So I had a whole nother experience of L'Oreal for that period of time. Like you said, left to go to Publicis, spent a couple of years at Publicis, and I'm now back in it. It's fascinating, the difference. So there are things that are completely different, as in like some people have changed, some people have moved on to different roles or different companies. And then there's things that are the same. You know, there are certain documents that are the same as they were always done before, the process of going through, getting something established or something done, similar process, a lot of that stuff hasn't changed. And of course, the brands are still spectacular, like truly some of the most amazing brands in the marketplace. So it's fun to be connected to them. I'm learning new things though. So I have calls with folks that I would have never talked to when I was on the agency side, like the customer care center, and just the exceptional work that they're doing there, which I find so interesting, right? I'm all about the consumer first and caring about the consumer's experience and what it's like. And you've heard me say 100 times, advertising one well as a service to the consumer. And I think that's true in everything we do. When we do what we do best, we are in service to the consumer and truly helping them feel better, look better, live better, whatever that happens to be. And so it's kind of fun to be on this side of it and seeing how all of those other pieces play into that amazing consumer experience.
Well, it's a great segue because we're all kind of curious because beauty is such a touch of it. That's just a place where you go to a location, you buy things, you play with them, and obviously because of the current pandemic, they're much harder to do these days. How do you, as head of media, maintain that consumer connection, whether it's through whether it's distancing, personal grooming, all that's been upended? Is it more about stories about consumption of the product? How do you find ways to tell those narratives?
I think it's true for every brand that's out there, right? You don't have the same level of consultation that you had before. People aren't lingering in the store to look at products and read the packaging. So there's a lot of work that's getting done as a consumer before you ever show up in the store to make sure that you're getting the product you want, or you're buying it online and you're doing your research online and go ahead and getting it from Amazon or Walmart or Target, whoever is going to supply it to you. I think the need for every brand, L'Oreal aside, or L'Oreal included, I think the need for every marketer out there is to make sure that you have robust content available to your consumers to make smart decisions. And so the trend that I've seen with every brand I've worked with over the past few years, but especially all of those brands today in an age of I can't spend that same time in the store, has been to build up their social media presence, find ways to bring that experience online on behalf of the customer. And you see that happening on the L'Oreal sites. If you spend any time visiting some of our sites, you'll see really great virtual try-on capabilities, color matching capabilities, really putting technology to the forefront to bring about opportunities for the consumers to experience and touch and be a little bit closer to the product. I think the other thing that I've seen from many brands is return and exchange policies, right? Our retail partners are doing a great job of that. Brands are doing a great job of that. Try it, see if you like it. If it doesn't work for you, let us know. And then I mentioned the customer care center being available to them when they have a question, because what you don't want is a woman trying a new hair color or a guy trying a new hair color and having it go terribly wrong, right? There's questions. There's questions about the ingredients. There's questions about what it's going to do. Can I really bleach out this color? It's not easy, by the way, to bleach out this color, so I don't highly recommend it. But those are some of the things that you have to be available and ready to answer to that customer whenever they ask.
So obviously you're only less than a month in, but to tell these stories, to connect with people, is there any sort of plan of action on TV, digital, social? Is there any mediums that you prefer more than others right now? Because obviously a lot of the variables are happening across all these different platforms.
Yeah, I think you have to look at where consumers are spending their time, right? We've seen not just L'Oreal, but the industry has seen tremendous shifts in consumer time spent. So if we look at even the reports that have been put out by some of our industry organizations, we've added about, on average, I think 41 minutes a day of content consumption, of media time consumption. That's a lot of time, that additional 41 minutes. I kind of akin that to the commute time, right? Where I might have been driving the car or in the subway or riding the train. That time is now spent probably sitting on my couch watching a video that I wouldn't have watched before, or allowing myself that opportunity to browse that additional few pieces of content that I wouldn't have browsed because I was in the process of walking to the train station. So when you follow those consumer habits, video is increasing, time spent specifically on their mobile devices, which is interesting when you consider how much time we're spending at home. We're all spending it at home. So when you have more than one person in the household, the amount of time spent on the big device versus the little device gets bifurcated across the entire group. And so you end up with a lot of people spending their time on this. Too many notifications. I'll set that down. A lot of people spending time on their device, and maybe as much, if not more, also getting spent on the big device like the one behind you. So considering where we need to be for the consumer is really about listening and watching where they're going and making sure that we're contributing and showing up. Television has increased. Our linear television, I'm not talking about us, but linear television viewing has increased. So I think advertisers need to pay attention to that. We're going into a complicated marketplace with the election coming up. We're going to have so much money. I think the quote was $3 billion spent in 2 months on digital alone during this period. It's going to be complicated without as much live sports to pull some of those big advertisers. Some of those very large advertisers in this market who would normally advertise on live sports are now going to start to put those dollars in other places. They don't want to miss reaching their customer, so they're going to have to find them in other places. So I think you're going to see a lot of complication in the marketplace going into Q4. I also think that there's a tremendous continual shift to digital, and every brand I have worked with in the past 5 years has said more digital, more digital, more digital. And I think we're all headed that direction. And the consumer shifts that we've seen aren't going to change, right? I think you're not going to see maybe the same level of peak that we've seen of people spending time with mobile content or on mobile devices, but you're not going to go back to what it was before, right? We've reached a new high, and that threshold is going to continue to maintain. The same is true for e-commerce. We've seen 10 years of e-commerce growth in 6 months as an industry. So that's not going to change. Consumers have learned those new habits, and they now know that they can get their fresh product delivered. They now know that Amazon brings them everything they need to have. Those are new habits that will probably stick, maybe not at the same levels we see them today when we can't go to a store, but at new highs than we've ever had before.
Yeah. Do you think at any point it levels off? So let's say the world opens up middle of next year. I'm hoping, knock on wood, happens earlier than that. But do you think that the numbers then, obviously we hit a new high and a kind of new crest of where it's going to be? We think it's still people rather be offline and buy things in store. Or you think that this behavior, we're now 6 to 8 months in, people do get new habits, they get new behaviors. Do you think at any point it will switch back, or is it going to still be e-com kind of beating the numbers?
I don't think it's ever going to switch back to the levels it was before. I think we're going to maintain a new high, just not quite as high as we are now. And I do think consumers are craving, and I look to other markets to understand how consumers' behavior is changing. And specifically in this case, you want to look at what's happening in Asia and China, because they're so far ahead of us in terms of the virus and how they're coming back. And you're seeing they want to be back in the store. They want to touch, they want to feel. I think we're the same way, right? As soon as we have the opportunity to get back in the store and feel comfortable and confident that we can touch, feel, and play, to try on that foundation color, to see what it looks like on my pores, we're going to go back to some of those things. Whether that means we're going to do it at the same levels we did it before, I just don't think so. I think the habit of getting it shipped will become even more interesting. I actually said years ago, somebody was asking me my predictions of the future of retail. And I've often said that I really feel like the opportunity for retail is to be the experience and let the e-commerce be the store. So the opportunity is to really go into the experience of, and we saw this a little bit with Warby Parker when they first launched, right? And you see it a lot with audio speaker companies like Bose, even Tesla, right? Like it's not an online purchase, but the storefront that they give you is an opportunity to touch and feel and play. Yeah, you may buy it there, but it's not getting delivered to you at that location in a mall. Like that's not going to happen. So I think the opportunity for the store to be the experience and something that you enjoy going to for a relaxed experiential time versus the actual checkout process will be the ultimate future for me of retail.
And you mentioned that obviously live sports primetime TV has been upended, even though there's still more consumption happening. Do you think that any social platforms, whether Pinterest, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, are going to be the beneficiaries of this, where people are now used to being on that screen and maybe in their bed, kind of playing around with things more often? I guess what do you think that money might shift to because of the upending of kind of this, everyone kind of watching by committee being kind of gone, or at least upended?
It's interesting because I'm watching Facebook closely as I'm seeing just from a my friends and family moment, right? Like Facebook fatigue is also a bit of a real thing, especially as we go through an election cycle. People get frustrated with all of their friends on one side and all of their friends on the other. So I think we'll see a blip in how people consume Facebook over the course of the next couple of months, specifically during the election cycle. But people are participating in social platforms even more. And it's interesting that you mentioned TikTok, right? And we'll see what happens with the executive order and their countersuit or their suit in response to it. We'll see how that all turns out with their potential purchase. But you're seeing an even more meteoric, is that the word I'm looking for, rise of influencers and their true capability of influencing. And I attribute some of that to, I can't go shopping with a friend. We've often said that like friends and family are the biggest influencers of a purchase. And if you can't go shopping with your best friend, my best friend's out in California. I can't go visit her right now. We're not going to go wander around a shopping center or a bunch of stores together like we normally have to touch and play and try. Last time I saw her, we were in the Rothy's store in San Francisco having a great time trying on shoes. That wouldn't happen right now. We both walked out of there with more shoes than we expected to. So good for Rothy's for creating a great experience for both of us. But that's just not going to happen. And so I don't have her with me to create that influence. Where is that influence coming from? It's likely going to come from those content producers that are entertaining and engaging and really building a relationship with you. And it's interesting to watch Gen Z with this. My daughter is part of that Gen Z generation, and she is drawn in to these talents because she just feels like they're her best friends. They're the people who are giving it to her straight. There's no holes barred on any of it. She thinks that they're the ones on the up and up, even if they're selling a product. And I think we've done a good job as an industry by making some of the rules and regulations that we've made, where if an influencer is selling a product, they have to say like, hey, I'm being sponsored to tell you this, but this is why I think it's good. Mm-hmm. She trusts that more than she trusts an ad that I've put in front of her on Instagram.
Do you think the future is more celebrity influencers? Do you think it's more mid-sized macros, the more nano micros and small communities? I mean, obviously all kind of have a place, but do you have any sort of POV on the future of influencers, and whether it's beauty or any platforms or any?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they all have a place, right? The celebrity still carries a lot of weight, and you take celebrity influence all the way back to Giorgio Armani with his tuxedo back in the day was the first like celebrity influence moment, right? Like dressing the stars was I think where that all started for the red carpet. And that I think that celebrity halo will always have a place, but it also always carries a risk. And I was involved with brands who over the years who were dealing with celebrities who went through some tough times while they were with those brands. Tiger Woods was one of them. The whole incident that happened with his wife happened while I was working on a brand that was him. And you do run that risk. You run that risk with any influencer, but the risk you run when it's a celebrity influencer obviously has much more scale, much more reach, and has the potential to end up on the evening news. If it's a micro influencer or a mid-size influencer, less likely to end up on the evening news, and something easier to potentially pull away from because you're not quite as invested. So I think there's a place for all of them. I think the mid-size influencers, though, are the ones that excite me the most. I think they still carry a really strong sense of authenticity to their followers. The ones that I've worked with in the past that I think are really exceptional, what they do are, they're not just kids sitting around with a cell phone videotaping themselves. They care about the analytics. They're watching the traffic. They want to know what their followers are saying or feeling, and they want to respond. And so they're really careful about who they partner. Feel their personal brand is on the line. And it is much a compliment to be chosen by them as it is a compliment to them for you to ask to have a partnership with them.
Yeah, it's very reciprocal, and the right brands rep on the right influencers, and then people can, and consumers can tell. And actually, that's a good segue into, I guess, you're head of media. You've been at agency world for years. What's your POV on influencers as it relates to metrics, so measurement? So do you think of them as top of funnel? Do you think of them as lower funnel? I mean, obviously they all. My POV, I guess, is that celebrities obviously have certainly a earned media ability, some PR ability. But I guess how important is ROI, ROAS when it comes to L'Oreal or any of the things you're going to be doing for your brands? Is that central to spend with influencers going forward?
Every brand has to think about the balance of whether you're getting top of the funnel or bottom of the funnel, right? And every brand has to have both. There is a place for phenomenal storytelling that gives a consumer the reason to believe in your brand, that gives them the reason to be passionate about it, and for you to tell the story of why they should care. And then there is a place for, oh, and by the way, here's the way to best buy our product. And I think influencers can actually sit in both places, and really interesting influencer campaigns allow that influencer to play that entire funnel throughout their campaign with you. So they can do the fun, the entertaining, the educational, the demonstration, all of that really great engagement opportunity. And then they can give the down and dirty, like, if you liked what you just saw, if you liked seeing the way this mascara went on my eyelashes, here's the link to buy it. And here's a great opportunity for you to go straight through to the bottom of the funnel. So I think it can truly sit on both. When I'm looking at influencers, it depends on the individual campaign, right? What are we trying to accomplish? There's always a grand campaign metric that we are driving for. This product needs as much reach as we can possibly get it. This product really needs to drive sales right now. This product needs to break through and be talked about more than it has in the past. It needs to be top of mind. So whatever that kind of macro metric is that is needed in order to help that business and to truly get that product into the market well, that's going to be the driving decision maker on how we ask that influencer to participate.
So with all of our clients, I mean, it feels like it's a newer idea for them, but I think it's been around for years. Obviously, you want to find the audience you want to speak to wherever they live. How important is it for you to marry, like, you don't necessarily go up the high end of TV, but like, the audience that watch a certain TV show or watch a certain program that then also is served on a certain publisher network, and then that same audience is then sequentially hit on social? Do you think there is a journey where you're basically following them wherever they go?
Yeah, I think that can work. I think you have to be really careful how you do that to not be a nuisance to the consumer, right? So frequency is an important piece. I often say frequency is an important piece in anything we do. I have to tell my kids 3 or 5 times that I really want them to empty the dishwasher before it actually happens. I did go so far as taking my husband is a trained chef. It's not his profession, but he is trained. And as a result, we have a bus bin that sits next to the dishwasher. And so people will throw things in the bus bin. I went so far during the pandemic to write on the bottom of it, use dishwasher first and flip it over so that people would actually use the dishwasher. Sometimes you really need to get in people's face with a message. And sometimes you just have to have that frequency. So I think that frequency can be really important. But I think there's a cautionary tale there of trying to just measure ad memorability, because ad memorability can be gamed. And I can put the same ad in front of you 100 times. You will remember it. You will also hate it. No matter how good that ad is, you are going to be annoyed with me for being in front of you that many times, right? So there is a tipping point of making sure that we get to you just the right number of times to make sure that it's valuable, back to advertising as a service, to making sure that we don't just disappear, right? And on the flip side, making sure that we don't annoy the living daylights out of you and that you hate us for just being in your face all the time. How many times have you gone to a retail site, and this is one of my favorite examples, I went to buy light bulbs. I bought light bulbs. The light bulbs then followed me around for the next 6 weeks. Enough with the light bulbs. I bought them, they're here, they're installed. I don't need new light bulbs right now. Even if you offer me a discount, now I'm just mad that I could have waited and gotten the light bulbs for cheaper. So,
yeah, hit me 5 years from now when the light bulbs go bad. Yeah.
Right, if they go bad. They were LEDs. They're not supposed to ever go bad.
Yeah. Well, so all right. So pursuant to kind of the audience being everywhere, including social. I mean, you came from both sides, agency, you know, obviously the brand side, the media.
Right.
With all of the boycott and governmental issues happening, you know, with the social media platforms, you know, what do you think brands need to do to evaluate which platforms they should or shouldn't be on? Is that something where obviously there are POV on Facebook and Instagram, there's TikTok stuff? I guess, you know, now that you're on both sides, I guess what would you give like a checklist to people, or what would you say is the best way for them to determine their best decisions?
Yeah, a few ways to approach this. I think you have to start with the basic hygiene of, you know, brand safety, viewability, fraud, right? Like the kind of basic hygiene pieces. And look, I'm one of those people that's a bit annoyed by the amount of money that we spend on our media dollars to maintain basic hygiene. But the internet is still a little bit of the wild, wild west. And so some of those dollars are well spent in making sure that we maintain and measure that hygiene and hold our partners to accountability. I will also say, I think the media partners have gotten better about preemptively avoiding fraud, hate speech, all of those things that we want to make sure aren't there, most of them. But I think that's the base level. The next level, though, is an interesting one, because then you have to really have a conversation inside your organization about how you want to show up and how you want to participate. And you saw this with the Facebook boycott. There were brands that were loud and proud to step in and have a voice in that conversation. There were brands that quietly turned things off. There were brands that didn't turn things off. And I was on a call earlier this week with another marketer who was mentioning that they didn't turn things off because they were a direct consumer brand. This is not inside L'Oreal, it's completely outside. He runs a direct to consumer brand, and he said, look, if we had had 2 months to turn off our marketing and reestablish that sales funnel somewhere else, I could have participated. But I would rather be around to have a voice in the conversation as a business 2 months from now than to have shut off my number one sales channel and not have existed as a company in a couple of months and not had the opportunity to even have influence in the conversation. So they made a really tough decision as a business that they wanted to not shut it down because they needed to be able to still sell their products. They were careful about where they ran in feed versus sidebar, et cetera. And they continued to run. Did they get called out for it? Did they get yelled at for it? No. And I think that was one of the things I appreciated about this particular event, was that there wasn't any shaming of brands, not that I saw at least, of brands who decided to stay because they had a reason to stay. I am sorry. I have my husband vacuuming. My husband's vacuuming. It's quite lovely. Right outside my door. Are you hearing that? Is it like?
Vaguely. It's okay.
Frequency has worked. Okay. Training. Sorry about that. I should have put up a note. Quiet on the set. So I think so it would have been a Pyrrhic victory to like, all right, I joined the boycott, but my company went under. That wouldn't have helped anybody. And the idea that that, like I said, that the shaming piece. One thing that we give out these intelligence reports to a lot of our brands. It really has been led. I mean, the boycott made sense in terms of trying to make change happen, and still going on for several brands. It really was media led. Like if you look at the numbers, 97% of mentions were from media outlets and from brands about themselves. Consumers are relatively unaware of it and weren't saying, why are you on Facebook? So it really was a inside baseball moment. And it was really an inside baseball moment. And I also think there's so back to the kind of the second level of participating or not participating, you have to have an understanding inside your own organization of what's important to you. If U.S. politics, if truth in political statements, if making sure that our politicians are held to the same standards as our advertisers and our brands, or if they're given the liberties that they're given in their television advertising, because that's really kind of the flip side of this, right? Like they're given a tremendous amount of liberty in their television advertising that advertisers would never have when we deal with the standards and practices teams at these networks, because they're really strict. But in this case, like political advertising is kind of given a bit of a pass with good intention, I think, because you want to be able to hear, you want consumers to be able to make their own, or citizens to be able to make their own decisions about their politicians. But I think there's a moment where it is beyond the marketing team, it's beyond the advertising team, it's beyond the media team to say we believe as a company. And so I would add to everyone's checklist, do all of the hygiene, but then go sit down and have a conversation with your CEO, your chairman, your head of diversity and inclusion, which I'm hoping everybody has now heads of diversity and inclusion in their organizations. Should have had them before, but if you don't, hopefully you have them now. Have an honest conversation with that executive leadership team to understand philosophically, where do we stand as a business? And how do we want to participate when things like this come up? Because this isn't going to be the last time that we have a conversation about these topics.
Well, it's great advice, and it's actually perfect timing. So we have 10 minutes left for Q&A, and we have a million questions coming in. So one of the first questions is, and I think because of your knowledge in the space, people are asking, did you have a professional mentor early on in your career? How did that relationship impact your journey? Did you, I know we've talked about it in the past around, Miss America, and you actually had some tremendous experiences to be able to build up your current speaking abilities. Is there any individuals or organizations you work with that maybe have been a great inspiration for you?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. So you mentioned Miss America. I am on the board of Miss America, and all too well I could go on a whole spiel, which I won't waste our last 10 minutes on about Miss America, but if anybody wants to know more and why I'm involved, I'm happy to share the story. I'll simply say Miss America is the largest scholarship provider for women in this country, and women carry 3/4 of the college debt in this country. Leave it at that. You want to know more? Ping me. Happy to talk about it. I was, I think you know this, as a small child, was very much involved in musical theater. So I loved being on a stage, and I loved performing. I did 18 years as a professional musical theater actress, which is also why I have so many great friends who are on Broadway that I want to help through this time. I transitioned into data and analytics. I know those things go totally hand in hand. Clearly an obvious transition. That transition, honestly, if I'm talking about mentors and people who helped me, was my mother, who was the first ever manager of customer specific data at Bristol Myers Squibb. So she got me into data and analytics, and that was just kind of the start of that. Beyond that, there have been folks like, I don't know if anybody's still in touch with Chris Schroeder from Washington Post Newsweek Interactive. He's the former CEO back then and has gone on to write some amazing books about entrepreneurship in the Middle East. He was a great mentor to me when I was running Morpheus. I honestly think I got my master's running my company. I don't have a master's degree, but when people ask me about being an entrepreneur and what it did for me, running my own company was really a big piece of that. And I think mentors and advisors are the people that you collect over time. So I've been really fortunate to collect folks like Chris, like a Rob Norman, like a Dave Pensky, that I can reach out to and ask, hey, how's this going? What does this mean? And I'm fortunate to count some of my industry friends like yourself over the years who have grown up to either run their own companies or be CEOs of major corporations like Meredith, now running the New York Times. That I'm proud to count amongst the people that I will turn to for advice and counsel. And I left off Marla Kaplowitz in that list, which I shouldn't. She was my CEO at MEC, and she was a phenomenal champion of mine along the way. And there's probably a dozen others that I'm forgetting. So apologies, because I do love them.
Well, it's an amazing role there. And yeah, I agree with you. Entrepreneurship is the best trial and error master's degree in history. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure you've had that over the last dozen years.
Absolutely.
Cool.
But you know this as well as I do, Ryan. This is a really small industry. And so you never know. Yeah. The person that is the intern to you today is the CEO of the next big hot company tomorrow. And so bring people up the way you want them brought up, treat people with the way that you want to be treated. All that golden rule always still applies. And maintain those relationships, because you just never know where that person is going to be of influence in your life in the future, or where you can be of influence to them.
Well, you just described people on agency side, publisher side, brand side. And one of the questions here is that now that you've seen it from both sides, what's the biggest difference between working at an agency versus the brand side?
Ask me again in 6 months. I'm only a few weeks in right now. I think the quick answer that I can give you to that is that right now, what I'm seeing on the inside is just more depth and breadth of information in how the sausage is made, how the decisions are made. On the agency side, I think we get this moment of like, the budget's cut, or they're asking for another rework of the media plan, right? There are real business needs that make those decisions. And I think I've always known that. It's just interesting to be on the inside of it. And I've said this long before I moved to the client side, but everybody you work with has their own truth happening in their world. They've got a boss to answer to, or the market to answer to, whatever position they're in. And your job on the agency side should always be to make your client look like a rock star, because if you make them look like a rock star, they're going to ultimately know that you're the person that's helping them succeed, and you will succeed in turn. And I think there's, in my role now, my opportunity is to make sure that the internal organization looks like rock stars. My job is to be in service to the brands.
Sage advice as always. So one more question. Obviously, again, caveat, she's less than a month in. So many brands have drastically reduced media budgets over the past few months. How has your media plan adjusted? You may not have things fully fleshed out yet. If your budget has been reduced, have you gotten more creative and efficient with your strategies?
It's a great question. So I don't think I can speak specifically to how the budget has shifted or changed. Not in a place to do that at the moment. What I can say is what I'm seeing across the industry, because I had views into this in my previous roles on the agency side, and of course talking to friends around the industry. There are certain categories where, and we see this in some of the public reporting too, certain categories where budgets have decreased dramatically, travel being one of them, right? Airlines having all of the challenges that they're having. And it's not a surprise. I think everyone is looking for the most efficient and effective media buys that they can get into market, ourselves included. And so how do we make sure that we're reaching them at the right time, at the right place, but really reducing as much waste as we possibly can along the way? I know that probably doesn't answer that person's question as deeply as they'd like to, and I'm sorry. So come back to me in a bit.
Well, you know that we're simpatico and that we love metrics and media. I geek out on all those things. One of the questions here is, obviously, we've known it for years coming, but it's a new development, obviously, with the cookie laws. So is L'Oreal, and obviously your experience before that, are you exploring contextual efforts to advertise, given the IDFA, the cookie laws going into effect? So how are ways you're going to be able to navigate what is a very weird new normal around TCPA and GDPR compliance?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the future of a cookieless world is one of my favorite topics in general, outside of even just being a part of L'Oreal and helping the brands that I've helped over the years. I think we all need to take a minute and level set that a cookieless world is not a new thing. We've been headed down this road for a long time. Safari got rid of cookies a long time ago. So did Firefox. Like, this is not new information. This is just the big behemoth in the room that is Google finally doing it. And they've been talking about it for years. So it's not a surprise, but any marketer who is not building their first party data right now is not paying attention to what's coming in their future. So first and foremost, my advice to any marketer is make sure you understand the right ways to build authentic consumer connections and first party databases. Then also pay attention to your partners who are in the space. When we look across the media partners, there are going to be first party data collections in places that I think were going to be a bit of a surprise to folks. Or maybe they won't consider to have the same level of value that they probably should. And I'll use examples like Condé Nast and Hearst and Meredith Corporation, places where we normally think of as magazines, are actually becoming powerhouse digital partners And in that powerhouse, they're also building paywalls or content walls that then have access to first-party data, and they have audiences that are of interest. So how do we start to partner with folks like that to build access to talk to consumers still in a way that is authentic and well-targeted? It doesn't answer every problem that the loss of first-party cookies is going to do to us, right? Like, we are going to have multi-touch attribution problems. We are going to have a hard time tracking all of the things. I am hopeful that some of the things that the IAB and some of the other industry organizations are doing will be of benefit to all of us. But I still don't think we've completely agreed on standardized terms and conditions. So we've been aiming for that for, 15, 20 years? And if we can agree on a universal ID, I will be shocked, but thrilled as an industry that we get there.
And is there, I mean, I imagine that there's weekly or monthly conversations, I'm not going to go in there for a month, where this is probably is the essential portion. So I feel like, because on the TV side, everyone thinks about it in the kind of what the creative is, which audience is there. It's a very different scenario. You come from digital, you come from, obviously done social as well. Is the internal discussion around this where everybody knows this is the future of it? Or again, even though it's been 2 years coming, we all saw it coming, does it seem like people are kind of like, now what do we do now? Or are people prepared for the most part?
I think that varies company by company. Some companies were further ahead. Those who had direct consumer businesses are much further ahead in pulling together first party audiences and having conversations with their brands. Those that are not direct to consumer, your kind of classic CPGs that are out there, are still having a bit of a challenge figuring out what it is they offer to value in the consumer in exchange for access to that first party data. But those are going to be important things to continue to look at and build up. And those are you're right, those are going to be weekly strategic conversations about how brands evolve into that space. And I think everybody's going to be looking to move more quickly, because it's not a television versus digital world anymore. It is all digital. And so we don't really need to talk about digital. We just need to talk about audiences, creative, and reaching those audiences with the right creative.
As always, sage advice. Thank you so much for your time, Shenan. We're going to actually bring back the team. But thanks so much, and have a great day, and we'll hopefully speak soon.
Fun. Bye.
Thanks so much, Shenan.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Ryan. So big thanks to you both for kicking off the day. That was a great session to start. We are now going to move into a very exciting panel with marketing leaders from the beauty industry. We're joined by 3 female marketing leaders, Delali Capozzo, the head of marketing for Uomo